Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Lowdown on Lowcode. I'm Rob Koplowitz. I'm one of your co-hosts today. Hey, if you like what you're hearing, hit the like button, hit the share button. A lot of like-minded folks out there trying to learn about what's going on with low-code and digital process automation and agentic development, all the things that we spend our time with. Would love it if you could share and help us get the word out. Hey, today we've got a really cool direction we're going. We're going to go in this direction for the next couple of weeks. And really start to look at the services side of the business, which is really super important, as we all know. So with that, what I want to do is I want to pass you over to today's co-host, Dave Marcus. Hey, Dave.
Hey, Rob. It's always great to be on the series with you. As you mentioned, we're changing things up a little bit right now, focusing a bit on the services side. I want to introduce everyone to our guest today, Marshall Sied from Ashling Partners. Marshall and I have known each other for a couple of years from my UiPath days, and we've kept in regular contact over the last number of years as well. They are doing some really interesting things from an innovation point of view, and we're excited to chat with you today, Marshall. So just to kind of kick this off, we find that our audience actually likes to hear a little bit about the background of the guests we have. And so can you take us through a little bit of how you sort of got here today, how this journey started, and, where you are?
No, well, first and foremost, thanks for having me, Rob and Dave. You guys, I like what you guys are doing at Analyst.Tech, and always happy to talk some shop here with some other longtime industry vets. Maybe a little bit on my background, Dave, to your question on the origin story. It's probably very similar to yours, I would say. So I grew up in the consulting space, implementing what is now called monolithic enterprise applications. So the attack on CMDB is well underway at this point. But the reality is, I implemented a lot of ERP packages. That's really how I started. And then you add practices and disciplines to go more end to end from a business operations perspective. You start with accounts payable, accounts receivable, general ledger, you add fixed assets, you add supply chain modules, and then you start adding CRM and front of the office applications. That's kind of been my heritage, and I really started getting more into the automation space, the modern automation space that we're here to talk a little bit about today, in the 2015, 2016-ish timeframe. Because at the end of the day, I felt like there was a better approach to delivering on demonstrable business value quicker than a multi-year cycle like an ERP implementation or module addition typically results in. So I'll pause there. Maybe that's kind of my backdrop before entering kind of the space we're here to talk about today, and happy to kind of talk about and what we've seen ever since that time frame.
Awesome, very cool. Over to you, Rob.
So, Marshall, services, wide scope of things we could be talking about here. There's we could go anywhere from business strategy to technology implementation. Can you give us a sense of what is the scope of a typical Ashling project, and then also, has that changed over the years, and do you anticipate it changing more as the landscape changes?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question, Rob. So maybe high level, Ashling's craft, if you start at the craft level, it's process improvement and automation engineering. And to us, AI in both the kind of general traditional machine learning context, but also in the generative and agentic context, has always been a part of automation. So we've been doing, we've had an applied AI group from the very get-go. And so our craft is really in automation engineering, actually building solutions that we take to production to measure value. But we've always done that along the coordinates of what we call the 4 A's of Ashling. So one of our kind of quote unquote value prop differentiators is advisory. So we've had domain experts in contact center and shared services, in energy, oil and gas, and banking and FinServ. So both horizontal and from a domain perspective and a vertical perspective. That's really how we start every engagement. It's a diagnostic, outside-in perspective on what we think the art of the possible is, but also the technical feasibility with the technology they have at their disposal. And then it's, the build side, it's automation, it's analytics. So that's really for us, traditional analytics, but also a lot of process mining we've done throughout the years. Very big believers in process intelligence. And then it's been AI, and AI's obviously evolved. I don't think you can pick up any news right now without hearing about AI or agentic workflows. But at a high level, that's how we're structured. What I would say, every engagement we have, Rob, is really focused on education to start, increasingly, because people are confused, people are conflicted. They're conflicted on what they actually believe in, what work they actually think is disruptible from their own role, let alone their whole team's role. And then they've got every SaaS provider under the sun coming in and talking about an agent studio or agent builder of some sort that they have at their disposal in their stack now. So education, the advisory piece is almost every engagement now. But the brunt of what we do is build. Like, we're builders at our hearts of hearts. And so, building what we call multimodal solutions. So that encapsulates RPA, it encapsulates low-code apps. We used to stitch BPM solutions together with task automation. And, now you're seeing this convergence, which is great, but it's also creating confusion with that convergence. And then embedding models increasingly into these long-running workflows. So, and that's really the brunt of what we do. We advise in order to make sure the client has a strategic value stream, so we can deploy iteratively and with high confidence and low risk. And then we have a managed service component. So, kind of traditional plan, build, run, if you want to kind of oversimplify it. But it's hyper focused on what has been classified as hyper automation throughout the last couple of years.
So I'm super excited to hear two things in your answer, and excited to learn more as we go forward here with more questions. But the two things, number one is people are conflicted, which is good, right? Because there should be some healthy skepticism, but there's also a there. We're really convinced of that, and this kind of concept of learning and advisory, and how you do that is I think really important in the market right now. And then thing number two that you said is the stitching together of different types of automation technologies, some of which will be deterministic, some of which will be probabilistic, all of which have a really interesting place in long running processes. So great stuff, Marshall. Hey, Dave, over to you.
Sure, cool. So Marshall, you talked about a couple of things that I just want to drill into in a little bit more depth. It continues to be noisy out there. It's always interesting to me. I'm on a Spotify podcast daily that is sort of a daily AI update, and it's ridiculous how much stuff comes up every day if you're watching this type of thing seriously, and almost completely overwhelming. And so as you go through an education process with people, how are you getting them to the point where they focus less on AI and more on the outcome that they're trying to achieve?
Well, that is a great question, Dave. And I would encourage you not to listen to that every single day, that podcast, yeah. By the way. Or it'll create your own confusion and frustration. I think, it is confusing right now. I mean, I've got family members that are not in my space at all that are asking, what are the implications of the GTP 5 release? And I'm like, well, they're huge, and here's why. But they're really not in the space. It's everywhere at this point. And vibe coding is good and bad from a lot of perspectives. If you practice enterprise technology with governance and risk and compliance wrappers that you need to think about, then vibe coding could be one of the most dangerous things ever. But it's also critical, and you can't swim against the tidal wave if you can. So I would always bring it back to 3 pillars, Dave, to answer your question succinctly. As much as things are changing, there's 3 components that I have found throughout my career, but especially in this space, that still hold true, actually even increasingly in this agentic workflow, broader end-to-end orchestration era we're entering. It's number 1, value. And it's so simple. Like, without value, it can't just be value theorized top down. You need to be able to show bottom up execution against that value. And as long as you have value realization as the beginning and end of kind of your program, however, if you're separating AI and automation, which I would never do, but a lot of large organizations started there based on funding and maturity and bureaucracy. As long as you have the value realization set up for success in real time and dynamic, you're going to be successful. So that's number one. Number two, in order to achieve the value, you have to have a continuous deployment methodology that doesn't have, kind of agile in name and title only, but the toll gates are set up to be expansive, so you can't actually deploy into production and therefore realize your value. So continuous deployment, continuous automation is number two. So basically a continuous build operation. And then number three to me is you have to be, this is where like the testing piece that you're talking about, like kind of always learning, you have to increasingly force your aperture to go more end to end. So RPA, huge value because it was very demonstrable, but at the end of the day, it was task automation, right? With BPM was orchestration, but maybe not as agile as task automation. So if you bring those together and you throw in agents as another actor, well, you're going more and more end to end. And then you're putting you guys all come from a low code background. If you're thinking about the UX based on the stakeholders that business case addresses, then you combine and converge low code. So you're kind of just summarizing value, continuous deployment, and then forcing your organization to continuously enhance by going more and more end to end as MCP comes into the equation. And BPNN 2.0 standards are being adopted more and more across process orchestration engines that also can adopt agents into that orchestration. So those three I don't think are going to change, Dave. And that's kind of how we set up the tenets of most educational cycles. There's a lot of other ways possible, but I would say that's it in summary.
Absolutely, that makes sense. Are you encouraging your clients to sort of experiment more? In the past, there was this sort of, let's go out and we'll do some kind of RFP and we'll put down a list of things we want to see. Then we'll figure out what vendors we want or technology we want to choose. In today's world, it almost feels like you have to do the opposite of that and really experiment at scale.
I mean, another great question. You guys came in with some good questions here today. So yes is the answer. I've never seen, even with, kind of when RPA was at its fever pitch and, prior to that, some of the BPN pieces, because that was more relegated to architecture organizations a lot of times, unfortunately. I don't think I've ever seen a window where C-suite executives at, Global 2000 organizations actually want to touch agents. And so we're doing a lot of agentic workshops. You mentioned UiPath. We were their first global partner that was accredited to do agentic workshops on their behalf because, we over-index to education because that is the way forward from our perspective, because everything's going to change so quickly. You can't build a moat that is as robust and deep as you used to be able to in services, software, or in any industry. So education and tinkering is critical, and it's not just the doers anymore. It's absolutely at this week. We have C-suite folks sitting in multi-day agentic workshops and building agents and learning user and system prompts and seeing how, hey, are we ready to flip from deterministic to probabilistic workflows? I mean, it's fascinating and it's exciting, but it's also fatiguing to try to lead them to the promised land, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. Rob, back to you.
So Marshall, you hit on a point, and I think you're kind of getting, you've gotten into this a little bit already, but I want to dive into it, very specifically. So everybody is an orchestration company now, right? and it's, so we at Analysis of Tech, we have a very specific definition of orchestration, just so people know how we're using the term. But you've got, the agent native companies, the AI native companies are increasingly using the term orchestration all the way out through, good old BPMN, which, no matter how much we bash it, it just continues to show its value. Give us a sense of how you folks at Ashling are using the term orchestration and what you're looking for in driving as sort of an orchestration being a key to this next generation of application.
Well, you're absolutely accurate on that, Rob. Everybody is moving to orchestration because they know in enterprise you can't actually go to scale with an agentic program and really kind of take it to the next level without orchestration layers to actually monitor, to codify and audit, have some type of more predictable trails. From our perspective, I think it's probably more aligned with a traditional BPNN standard, frankly, at this point. I think that will change over time, but I'll give you an example, the one I just mentioned on GPT-5's launch. If an OpenAI will get there commercially, from my perspective, but if you actually understood enterprise, you would not retire previous models, because you would understand that people are using models for very specific jobs to be done. And therefore, people are chaining a reasoning model with a generalized model in a actual orchestrated fashion.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think part of it is mindset. Some of these kind of AI native organizations fully don't understand what's going to be required in the enterprise setting. Then you have the traditionalists from a BPNN perspective, that maybe are too custom. It's kind of a little bit of a Goldilocks syndrome here. So you have the Appians, the Pegas, which are great technology still and still heavily leveraged. And I think that is kind of closer to my definition of orchestration today. And then you have what I would call automation natives that are adding the ability to enhance process through LLM APIs. So that's the UiPaths of the world. And then you have the pure breeds, like you have the Kamundas of the world from a BPNN perspective as well. I would say our definition is kind of somewhere more with the automation plus a Kamunda definition, if you will, because you're using standards, but you're also understanding that the actors within your process maps are changing. So you're adding agents, and because of that, you're adding other kind of sub processes and guardrails around that. So not sure I can give you a direct answer, but I can give you kind of comparisons, Rob, on that's how.
I think that was pretty direct, Marshall. I think you really gave. So let me give you our definition, and you could tell us if we're smoking the curtains or not, or if it lines up with yours. But as sort of these kind of lightweight orchestration things started coming up, we defined it as the ability to model and manage a long-running process across heterogeneous technologies and human states, right? And we figure that's sort of our entree into bringing in. Look, there's going to be. Obviously, you guys are well into sort of bringing in task automation where appropriate within that environment, handling more traditional kind of BPMN type things within that, but there isn't anything about the BPMN standard that precludes, that didn't anticipate new types of technologies like agents executing within these processes.
I would 110% agree with that. I think
that's better than 100. That's so good.
Yes, it's just sometimes we're looking to reinvent for the sake of it. That's what engineers do. We over engineer, right? And so I think to me, I have yet to see why BPNN 2.0 can't be at least the foundation for a lot of what we're looking to do moving forward. I think we're very big on trying to figure out a way to leverage standards from MCP as an example as well and incorporate it. So I think once again, the term convergence keeps coming up. Nobody stays in their lanes anymore. So I think you'll continue to see evolution of that definition, but I don't have anything to challenge on.
No, and I think there's just this whole concept that there's going to be that we think that a process is deterministic or probabilistic. No, it's not. There are definitely steps within a process where machines can emulate what humans are doing at either a manageable risk or little risk. There's places where you shouldn't put it in. There's places where your existing technology is just fine, right? like there's no reason to play with introducing these new technologies, and orchestration we think is the kind of the piece that pulls it all together. So Dave, hey, back over to you, bud.
Awesome. So we're going to take a quick break to a quick promotion break. For those of you who've tuned in, Analysis.Tech is a specialized analyst firm. Like everyone else, we certainly do research, but a lot of our focus is around bringing industry luminaries to a level of visibility through podcasts like this. In addition to that, we do a bunch of advisory work for vendors, for end customers, and others, focusing very specifically on this automation, low code, and related AI space. And we encourage you to watch us on the channels, go to Analysis.Tech, give us some feedback as to the kind of things that you'd like to see, and let us know if you like what it is that we're doing. So let's head back into the session with Marshall, because I know you've touched on a couple of topics, Marshall, that we want to drill in further. So Rob, back to you.
So this is usually where you've talked about all this cool stuff, and then, if you could see the audience, we can't see the audience podcast, but this usually where they go like this. But let's talk about governance, Marshall, because governance is critical to everything we do, right? I think there has been maybe not quite enough governance, attention paid to governance as we've gone through this kind of, very hectic pilot period around AI technologies and agentic technologies. And we have, we're getting a lot of numbers back that, these things aren't just not making their way into production. McKinsey, IDC, a whole bunch of folks talking about this. So look, you got to be the grown-ups in the room and start talking about this. How are you guys thinking about governance? How are you advising clients about it? How critical is this to folks getting full value out of these new technologies?
Yeah, and I think you're spot on, Rob. I don't think we've actually really entered the era yet. I think 2026, we're starting to see it, just to maybe give some benchmark on groundswell. These programs are becoming bigger. The requests are becoming bigger going into 2026, but it's because they're also consolidating with programs that have already passed the governance mustard test. And so I look at intelligent automation programs of the last 5 years. Well, you're starting to see, as opposed to proliferation, you're starting to see the way we do technical feasibility, business case viability consolidate. So we're actually doing exactly what you're saying. We're assigning the right technology and tool to the right use case, as opposed to forcing, the agentic hammer and everything is a nail for that agentic hammer. I think that was last year, frankly. Yep. I think we're entering an era where people are thinking about this, kind of in the scaled environment, and I'm excited for that because I think these capabilities all belong together. I understand that it takes time for large organizations to kind of turn the big ship, but I do think ultimately we're headed to a state where it's going to be a net positive for organizations or for individuals within the organization. I think there's a lot of the in solution, like if you're new to agentic, which is really kind of what I classify as AI in the enterprise production state. I think there's a lot of guardrails that a lot of people have read a lot about. It's we're beyond prompt engineering, we're at context engineering now. I think that's big to understand, and that's frankly why the Palantirs of the world have probably really kind of outperformed because they understand that. They also understand it takes services, so forward deployed engineering to do this the right way. I think the other piece is making sure that we're actually having an upstream assessment on where should we actually apply an agent versus something that's rules driven, right? To your point, inputs, outputs, Rob, on that's what a process is, and that's not going to change with an agent. It's how we get there from a reasoning and a goal orientation perspective, and how do we harden that so we have predictable outputs from that agentic workflow. At Ashling, we've developed assets because we think that's what a good service provider should do nowadays. But we have assets that'll assess RPA scripts. Hey, would this be better for an agentic flow as opposed to an RPA process at this point? I think that's going to be pretty critical. That's a first step towards governance. Obviously, you need to have reference architecture frameworks. You need to have kind of the classic CTO application rationalization approach so that when a use case comes in, you don't spend 6 months debating on, hey, can I do this in Databricks natively, or should I try a little Microsoft kind of full stack approach, or should I try this new thing from UiPath? I think reference architecture is going to really be a part of governance more than it has in the past. There's a lot more to governance here. I'll pause there because I'm sure you guys.
So there is a lot more to governance, and as you're talking through this, Marshall, I think what we, unfortunately, it's not within a podcast that we're going to get down into that level of detail, but we would love to talk to you further about the research we're doing on governance, because you're bringing up a lot of stuff that is really pushing the boundaries, really on the cutting edge, and stuff that I think will really help to get this technology, much more deeply embedded in enterprises, because you're just thinking through a lot of the hard stuff, which is great. I'm hoping we can talk to you more about this as part of our research that we do in this area. Sure. Dave, back over to you.
Awesome. So with that in mind, I guess, Marshall, one of the things that you mentioned this earlier, and certainly it's very relevant today, everyone claims that they're doing everything. And so, as I guess my question is about two things. Firstly, as a strategic advisor to organizations, are you seeing as part of your education that there's work that has to be done to kind of manage people's expectations with regards to what vendors are or the market is telling them is possible versus what's really possible? And then certainly as you guys are partnered with a number of people, you partner with UiPath, you partner with Microsoft, you partner with Celonis and others. And so how are you kind of selecting appropriate technologies to fit the needs that organizations have? And also, how often are you in a situation where you're seeing a scenario where someone is saying to you, like a customer is saying to you, we think we should be using technology X, and you believe they should be using technology Y?
Wow. Okay. I'm going to try to tackle it as you threw out there, Dave. But I think on the first piece, kind of weeding through, nobody's staying in their own lanes, everybody's saying they can do everything. I'm very big on capability mapping prior to tool mapping. And so if we look at, going back to my reference architecture commentary, if we look at high level, what do we need to actually hit demonstrable business value via automation and AI in a transformation program? Well, number one, we have to look at kind of value levers. Certainly that's where it starts. But how do I trace capabilities likely needed to those value levers? Like, I don't even want to talk about the underlying tools quite yet, because I think you end up going into, a sweat the asset conversation, a rationalization conversation too quickly. But if I'm looking at, broader automation, obviously a task automation, but you need agent orchestration, you need to understand the infrastructure layer, the connectivity layer of this. A lot of people are claiming to be, kind of open architecture, if you will, but then you see some of the moves that, some vendors are making and shutting data pipes off, frankly. So, I mean, I think you have to start at the capability layer, frankly, and, all the way down to evaluation and logging of models and confidence rating of models as this does become probabilistic versus deterministic. I mean, that's at the capability level. Then you map those down to your current stack where you've had, and then at the current stack, where have I had success, right? I've seen, I will give a shout out to a vendor that you mentioned in UiPath. I've seen a lot of organizations that had a lot of RPA and IDP success with a UiPath. So because of that, they're giving them a chance at the enterprise agentic platform layer. And, not every use case, I think it's a little bit of champion challenger here. Not every use case should probably go to a single platform, certainly. But I do think if you think about open architecture, you do that capability mapping before you map to actual tools. And then you look at what you have in your current stack. I think that's the right order of procedure. A lot of people start with the latter, right? They're like, hey, I spend a ton on Salesforce, so let me not necessarily see the capabilities, or if I've had demonstrable success, let me just look there first, right? So that would be number one. I think I hit on number two too, but can you remind me of what the other one was?
Yeah, I guess I guess just in terms of your own, from a vendor point of view, do you have, if you're advising customers at a high level,
Yep.
less about the specific outcome and at a high level about where to apply technologies where you have relationships with today, what does that look like?
Absolutely. So we do try, and I think it's actually insincere to say that there isn't subconscious bias, because you know the technologies that deeply, and so therefore their limitations, but also their advantageous use. So we try our best, but we have plenty of engagements where we stop after advisory, and they're really focused on Bedrock, AWS Bedrock, and it's the right approach at that point. Or they're a big automation anywhere organization, which we have some of that capability. That's probably a bad example, but we don't go as deep into that capability. Yep. So I think as long as you have the right capabilities and you understand the business case, like the value stream component I mentioned, and you understand limitations of the capabilities, maybe not necessarily like the bells and whistles of every technology. We have plenty of very large kind of advisory engagements that we do there. And, we also partner with Bain Consulting in a lot of scenarios because they are an investor in Ashling. And, we always take an agnostic lens where it makes sense. What I am finding in the enterprise client persona, Dave, is that they want you to stand for something, though. And I'm a big believer on making sure that you get as well aligned on incentives as you can. And if it makes sense for them to evaluate something that's outside of their stack, we'll recommend it and we'll tell them why. And sometimes they'll challenge that, and sometimes we won't recommend it because it doesn't make sense. But I think just being very clear as a service provider where we go extra deep, full life cycle, if you will, is pretty critical.
Awesome. Very cool. Rob, back over to you.
All right, let's close it out with this one, Marshall. We've been kind of exploring this with a lot of our guests, and it's been very interesting, the trajectory of where you've brought us today. So, and your career, you started off with big package implementation, ERP, packaged applications. You moved into more of a nimble task automation thing. We talked about orchestration. Our process, we've often said our processes really don't respect these legacy silos. They don't respect our organizational boundaries. And we're on this precipice of this world where, potentially we could think about running our business in really fundamentally different ways. Reimagining it is the term that we often use. What does the future of applications look like? And how are you guys kind of thinking about preparing for that?
And I guess just to add to that, Marshall, it's, you talked about your own IP that you're creating for frameworks, etc. Does that same thing apply to your own IP and sort of new solution areas delivered from Ashling?
Yeah, no, I think maybe starting with that last piece, Dave, yes, I absolutely think it does. I think, I think services and software for many years, look, I've always been in professional services, and we've always talked about productizing aspects of what we do. And, 20 years ago, it was in the form of human capital. So, John knew banking really well, or Jan knew the procure to pay process of a manufacturer very well. And then it evolved into templates, and then it evolved into scripts. So, true knowledge articles. And now it's evolving further into more end-to-end, but also composability within end-to-end. And in that composability nature, there's going to be IP that, an Ashling should bring to the table, frankly. And so, that's kind of how I think about the evolution, Dave. And, years ago, we created something called Ashling Brick Bucket. And it was basically, snippets of code and models, process mining connectors to certain systems that are, very unique to industries, PNC as an example with Guidewire. And we were actually, probably a little ahead of where we should have been, frankly, because clients weren't ready for that. And everybody's clients, every process was a little unique. So, the components didn't equal enough of an uplift for them to leverage it without us doing a custom build. And then, then GitHub, coding assistance, Copilot came out, and, that was really kind of the thought process, but now you have it times, a million in regards to, code lines that you can pull from. So I think you constantly have to be infusing that into your model, and you're going to be builders, productize builders more and more as a service provider. But as long as it bolts on and complements what a client needs and the core technology they has, or else you're just proliferating the tech debt challenge that everybody's trying to, we're shifting tech debt from licenses to, tokenization and API calls. And, people are confused as hell about that. So I don't want to add to that confusion. I want to actually dispel that confusion.
Absolutely. And so I just, before closing, I just wanted to add or ask one other question. You talked about this briefly earlier. So are you suggesting to people to be cautious with things like vibe coding technologies? It can get completely out of hand, but at the same point in time, there's a lot of value. And so, how do you think about that?
Yeah, I think as an individual, I say go vibe code. I'm very much of the mindset that unless you're out there doing, you're going to have trouble understanding this era we're entering more than ever. It's not like looking at an SAP workflow on paper or Oracle PeopleSoft and understanding the flow, but not knowing people code as an example. So I'm all for it. I think when you start to promote that as enterprise grade is the second you have to be cautious. And I am seeing that happen a little bit right now where, we know how to build enterprise grade solutions, right? And clients have a lot of smart, curious people, and we want to stoke that curiosity.
Yep.
But we also need to be pragmatic realists. Forward deployed pragmatism is a saying at Ashling. And we have to be pragmatic about the fact that what you vibe coded over a weekend is absolutely not hardened usually for an enterprise setting, and embedding it into workflows. I mean, once again, Palantir is a great example where they've been practicing this a long time and have had a lot of success because they understood it. It takes time in the enterprise setting to embed models and decision platforms like Palantir into enterprise grade workflows that are already existing. So that's kind of where I would kind of triage that a little bit, Dave.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Rob, do you want to close out?
Yeah, listen, I just want to thank everybody for joining. You can find us at analysis.tech. Marshall, how do we best find you, and how do we best find Ashling?
You find me through Ashling. I go as Ashling goes, Rob. But ashling.ai is the website. Very, very active on LinkedIn. And we're very big on putting real world Global 2000 production use cases out into the public. I think those are the most critical. I mean, that's the number one thing people ask us for. Like, where have you actually done this? As opposed to, the vibe coding or, what have you done in kind of proofs in sandbox environments. So, and those are the two best places to find me at Ashling, Rob.
And that's where you want to find your value. Marshall, thank you so much for joining us today. Dave, always happy to co-host with you. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks
for
all.
having me.